Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Dewan Lamont Hayes, Noise, and I'm here with Dominique Morgan of Black and Pink. And so thank you for this time. So we're in a very interesting time right now. And what we've been seeing as far as like the setting of Omaha and Nebraska, they're reducing numbers of gatherings in response to COVID-19. We're seeing a smaller amount of cases statewide, but there seems to be a lot of what this is revealing is a lot of flaws and maybe some gaps where needs are to be met. So please explain to us why we're here and what you're doing, particularly with Black and Pink, in response.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dewan, for making time, because there's so many things that are newsworthy that are happening right now. And I think noise was something that we wanted to really make sure that we amplified our message on, because there are so many Black folks in North Omaha who receive their information through your platforms. And at a time where there's so much pressure and we're in the midst of a crisis, it's easy to forget the least amongst us, because it's the larger population of folks where when they're being hit by oppressive systems and other things, we're like, okay, we kind of focus here. But we're missing conversations around folks who are currently incarcerated and folks who are coming out of incarceration at this time. There was a crisis in the state of Nebraska around the Department of Corrections before COVID-19. We were on the countdown for July 1st deadline for our population to be reduced, a federal guideline that had come down. We were in the midst of hearing about this new prison they're proposing to build in Ashland that was going to offset the numbers within the crisis. As of yesterday, 158 beds exist in corrections, period, before we are at one person in, one in out. That's what we were navigating before COVID-19. Now we have an overwhelmed system. We have employees who are being forced to work mandatory overtime hours inside of these institutions. We have families and loved ones that are not being allowed to visit their folks on the inside. Most folks who are in the community are navigating barriers around bringing in income. So that means that they're not able to buy phone time to be able to call their loved ones. Although corrections has allowed folks to send videos now through JPay. The videos are 30-second videos. The videos are one way, so from the community inside, and the videos are $1.25 per 30-second video. So we're navigating that now. And on top of that, folks who are being released, because that's still happening, the positions that someone who's formerly incarcerated historically would be able to get a job in, whether it's food service or it is waiting tables or doing something in a maintenance space, something of that nature, those are usually not seen as essential job positions. So those folks are coming out. We're not able to get them right into jobs. And the shelters and the housing spaces that we would usually try to get folks paroled to, or if folks were navigating issues around housing, we would try to at least build a stabilization plan around them. They're overwhelmed. People don't understand that many people in the state of Nebraska, their parole address is a shelter because most of them have nowhere to go, but you need to have an approved address to be released.
In order to get an ID and for all of that.
In order to get out of the institution and then to get the ID to be able to apply for emergency food stamps, all those things. If you are a person who's elderly, who's coming out of incarceration. And yes, there are folks who are elderly inside of these systems, folks who are getting Social Security benefits, all those things, we're not able to help them transition in that way. So today I wanted to talk about a letter that we sent out to the Nebraska Department of Corrections. We sent it to Governor Ricketts, and we sent it to the Inspector General on Monday, talking about, and people have used the terms demands. I think it's hard for me to frame basic human rights as demands. I think it's a call to action to use humanity. I think it's a call to action to be empathetic. Yesterday, across the country was the Day of Empathy put on by Cut 50 and here at Lighten House, where we are at today. Lighten House is the first home of its kind in the country that supports LGBTQ plus folks, folks who could be navigating HIV and AIDS who have been system impacted. And we look at this space as really a restorative, holistic place around living in communities. And we hosted that there. So we sent out a call to action to be human in a state that's pro-life, in a state that fought to put a death penalty back on the books. We're trying to figure out where humanity comes into play when we're talking about currently and formerly incarcerated people.
Certainly. And our motto is equality before the law.
Indeed.
So it's interesting to see how that truly plays out, or if it does at all, in circumstances. So can you tell us a little bit more about this letter that was sent? What inspired it, and then what are some of the specifics of that?
Yeah. What inspired it is that we gave a time of grace. So all of us at Black and Pink, we were in DC around March 10th. And that was when we were starting to see ripples in our country of people realizing the severity of what COVID-19 could be in our country. And we all got back into Omaha the 12th, and slowly conferences and meetings were being canceled. And I was like, okay, maybe this is the thing. And then it just became larger and larger. And then the weekend hit, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a problem. We need to figure out what we're going to do as an agency. So although Black and Pink our home offices are based in Omaha, Nebraska, we're a national agency with staff across the country and chapters all across the country, with nearly 18,000 members who are in our database who are currently incarcerated. So we instantly went into creating a strategy nationally for our work, and then figuring out how we were going to address these issues where our home office was. And we've had a trend in the 2 years I've been at Black and Pink is that we've been able to create templates here in Nebraska that have changed the way this work looks nationally. So we gave time for corrections to let us know what their plan was going to be. Because I look at corrections Facebook pages and social media pages, and there's a hashtag they use that's keep people safe. As a matter of fact, they've reduced their entire mission statement to keep people safe. And so I believe that in that they will be talking about the people who are incarcerated as well. And the first video from the Director of Corrections, Scott Frakes, the video was released on the same day that it was announced that he received a 30% pay increase. So our Director of Corrections here in Nebraska is making close to $200,000 a year to run a very damaged and fractured system. And I was thinking, well, oftentimes in times of crisis, and when leaders who may not have been the best before step up, and you see things in them that you know that they're the right ones to lead. And I was excited for that opportunity to see that in Director Frakes. And the first video was very cagey, and we weren't really clear about what the plan was. It mentioned a pandemic plan. And then my Director of Policy and Advocacy went online, and we tried to find the plan. I was like, this is awesome. A plan exists. We can get this printed off.
Great. We can get in contact with our members. We can share it nationally. There's something here that we can really follow up on.
There's something here. There's a start.
Yeah.
We couldn't find the plan anywhere online. And then we were asking questions about parole. We were asking questions about programming, essential programming that people need to complete to parole. What was happening? And these kind of soft questions, soft emails, we weren't receiving any response. And so then we took the time to sit down as a team, and we spent several days, we're all working incredibly long days right now, folks who are doing that community facing work, right? Yes. But we spent long days like, what's foundational things that folks deserve right now at this time? And then we took some time to send out the sample letter to our community partners here in Nebraska, opened that up to feedback from those folks. And the policy and advocacy team at Black and Pink took time to be meticulous, making sure that there are multiple voices that impacted this letter before it was sent out to these 3 individuals. And then we were lucky that 14 agencies signed on here. I would say that it was sad that many of the social justice agencies in the state did not sign on. But we were like, we want to just push. And one of the first requests was, please release the plan. Put the plan on the housing units, right? What sort of emergency plan is helpful when the folks who need to be able to engage in the plan don't know what the plan is? So I had started writing our inside members via JPay. Do y'all know what they want you to do if there's a breakout inside the institution? Have they told you have they given you masks? The elderly folks that are in some of these housing units, have they given y'all hand sanitizer? What soap do you have access to? And they were still unsure. And so we've said, let's put it all in the letter. Let's put it out there. The foundational ask was to release them. The foundational ask was to release them. And for some people that felt radical, the honest truth is this, and I use this parable often. If there was a foster parent who had been approved for a certain amount of young people to be in their home, right? And we know the expectation of people who are doing foster care, right? You feed them, you take care of them, the education they need, the safety they need, foundational needs you provide them. If that person was approved to have 5 kids in there, but they had 20 kids in the house, there were fires in the house, things were broken, people weren't showing up to make sure that the kids were being watched over, the children weren't receiving education. Children were leaving the house unprepared, not being successful. When they left, how long would we allow that foster parent to be a foster parent? It'd be call to action to shut it down immediately. Get all the kids out of there, right? Without knowing where the kids were going to go.
Yes.
We just say, let's stop the harm.
Yes, and we've seen it with Yale Park. We've seen it with multiple places.
Let's stop the harm.
Stop the harm.
Let's stop the harm. And the truth is, this is a time where we can stop the harm. 80% of folks in the Nebraska Department of Corrections are going to be released. Eventually. The majority, I want to say we have 8, like maybe between 8 and 12 people who are on death row. Most of our, so like the folks who are just like, well, what about the people who commit murders? Well, we're saying release them all, but let's play that question. Most folks who are in there, there are so many folks here in our state that are in there for nonviolent crimes. And even when we talk about violence, that's based on a perspective as well, right? We know biases exist. We know how white supremacy can exist in sentencing and things of that nature. How do we just say that this system is not prepared to handle these folks in times where it's not a crisis? They're definitely not prepared to handle them when there is a crisis. I asked a question the other day, if a person who works the first shift in corrections, which means they work about 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., if they had tested positive for the coronavirus, and there's usually an hour's time between first and second shift when they're in the same institution together. So based on how we've seen everything, you would have 2 shifts quarantined. What's the answer? Who runs the facility? Who, if there's a breakout inside the institution and the officers can't go inside, who's gonna make sure everything's safe in there? And no one has any answers. And in my experience, well, my belief is that if you are taking on a responsibility and you don't have clear and concise answers when there's a crisis around that responsibility, you may not be ready for that responsibility.
Certainly. And I saw a post actually today from the inspector. He has a Facebook Office of Inspection, and it was going through people who are on parole, and there was a whole post about parole. And something I was really interested in that they use is the term, so we use the term corrections. But then I was like, when is someone correct? And who determines that? And do those parameters change now? Because if things are in such a state that is unsure, and that we need to make quick adjustments to be able to address these things, if we have so many people on parole or who are eligible for parole, not on parole, eligible for parole, and what are our benchmarks for that? And I mean, that speaks to the system as at large, because, when we're talking about what is correct to whose standards. But now, what is our response, and how does community prepare or, give voice to preparedness or correction when we're talking about that?
I think community, we need to ask the common sense questions. Like you just asked, what's the benchmark? In a time of crisis, in a time where these systems are overwhelmed, if we have lists and lists of people who are eligible to be released, right? And what I can tell you is that some folks have been eligible for parole and they've had too many magazines in their room and they've received a misconduct report. And so their release has been delayed. Or there's a multitude of reasons why that's happened. For some people, they can't be released until they take their programming. Programming is not going to happen right now.
Mm-hmm.
Who can tell us when programming is going to start? Could we do this in a digital fashion? Could you parole them to their home and you put this online? I can say today we go out and buy a myriad of computers and set up classes here at Lighted House. If they were going to give us an option, I think the other piece is challenging community-based organizations to step up and allowing community organizations that you may not like to step up and alleviate burdens that you're not prepared to handle. I think we at Black and Pink have run against many roadblocks, even to send funds inside to our inside members. One of the things that we put into our letter was to address issues for folks who are immunocompromised, folks who are living with HIV and AIDS who are inside of these institutions, who may have multiple sclerosis. I have a good friend, her brother is about 23 years old. He was shot in the situation that led him to be incarcerated. The young man can't walk. The young man is still figuring how to physically move, and he's inside of this institution, and she's wondering when she's going to hear from him, right? And so those are the times when we would love to send in money just to make sure they had food, to make sure that they could buy hand sanitizer or they could purchase the soap they wanted. We haven't been able to send money to our inside members since August because accounting in the Nebraska Department of Corrections has been figuring out how do we support multiple people, right? So community members ask questions. And again, this isn't about, it's another press conference, it's another sit down when it comes to abolitionist values and when it comes to conversation of accountability, right? The thing I love about this letter is that these are basic requests that address the health of folks who are inside. And ask the question, if you're not concerned about how we're addressing COVID-19 inside of institutions, and a person gets released and they're infected, they haven't been tested, but they come back to the community, is that how we flatten the curve? How do you do social distancing inside of an institution when it's 8 people inside of a cell? How do you do that? How do you engage in social distancing when you have to allow people to touch you, to strip search you, to go through your property? How do those things happen? And that's what feels like the disconnect. We're very concerned about how we flatten the curve in the community, which we should be. But don't forget that there are folks inside who are navigating this, and without clear procedures and how we flatten the curve inside, we potentially could be setting ourselves up for failure in the long run.
Yes. And what I'm seeing also is that a lot of what's being discussed here is also being reflected in our public housing and many of our institutions, where you are consolidating people into confined spaces, and then there is no clear response of like, well, what do you do when there's a bunch of elders in a building that they can't move, they can't clean, there's already hazards. And so it's being revealed all over our community, all throughout our society of like, we're not prepared for a lot of things.
we are not. And if we go with the idea that, you take care of your own, I had a aha moment last week. There are so many, especially Black and brown grandparents who live in these towers. And the reason their grandchildren and children can't check on them because their grandchildren and children are locked up. When I ask ladies, where's your grandson, where's your granddaughter? Oh, they in the jail. So if we transition to this community standard of, check on your loved one and things of that nature, what about the folks whose loved ones can't check up on them? Yeah. So mass incarceration has ripple effects outside of the usual ways that we hear us talk about it. It affects the community. It affects the health of the community, and it affects the propensity for a community to really engage in restorative experiences. Because talking about North Omaha specifically, which is a space that both of us grew up in, right? We live in communities that have been trying to figure out how to get over the riots of the 70s and get back to healing, right?
Yes.
Right? So then we have this, it's like, what's going to happen that really gives us that space to engage in restoration? And how does restoration happen when only portions of the people get access to it, but they're still a part of the whole? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Folks on the inside are still a part of us. They are still our community. Yeah. They're still counting in the census, in the neighborhood which the prison is in, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're part of the whole, they're part of the community. So in regards to like you were talking about the housing piece, when we were looking at that they put a freeze on people being evicted from Omaha Housing Authority, one of our asks in our letter is that folks who are at work release, they pay upwards to $400 a month in rent inside of to be at work release. We asked them to put a freeze on them charging folks rent to be there. Not a delay, to not charge them. Because much like the community, if folks are just saying you don't have to pay it now, it means come May, June, you're going to have 3 months of bills that you are then behind on.
Yeah.
The grace period, we're past grace. We need stop, drop, and roll type of, things going on. Let's just say we're not going to do that right now and keep it cute so people can breathe. Because what's worse than being in crisis is coming out of crisis and then feeling the stress of having to figure it all out
and getting thrown into another one. Yeah.
Right. And so that was one of our asks. Do not charge them rent right now. Parole, do not charge them parole fees right now. If there's restitution that a person has to pay, halt those payments for the moment. Because again, the jobs that we allow system impacted people to have are not the jobs that are going to furlough you and let you work from home.
No.
Let's be clear. There are certain jobs we think it's okay for people who have been incarcerated to have. Burger King, McDonald's, things of that nature. And again, and we say this in our work at Black and Pink around our leadership development. If you walk in and you say, listen, I want to kick butt running this McDonald's. And our job is to say, well, how do we support you in doing that? What really happens is that we tell folks, no, take this or leave it. And if you don't accept it, you really don't want to be in the community and be successful. At this time, it really worries me because it's like, those are the folks who are being told, we don't have hours for you right now. Or if you do have hours, well, I need you to work 2 or 3 shifts because I've sent everybody else home. So that's in the back of my head consistently with how much money we allocate to housing support right now, how much money we are going to try to allocate to direct support of just getting soap in houses and laundry detergent, because there are questions. Well, I haven't seen anything very clear about how this carries on people's clothes. We've had people on the inside question if they can even open their mail because they have concerns that this could come on paper. Yeah,
well, and there's, information, as you said, is already a barrier. And so when something like this is like a pandemic is happening on the outside, there's all these changes and massive shifts, and there's a major delay, and you can't call, you can only receive messages in these bite sizes. That barrier to information it incites fear. It incites all kinds of stories and ways that you try to convince yourself or justify or make sense of it with the modicum of information you're able to access.
And people keeping information from you is a power play. It is wielding power in a very toxic way, be clear. Because for every person who's watching this right now and you've been on your couch watching these press conferences and you feel like I'm leaving this press conference from DC no more informed than I was when it started, imagine the folks on the inside and what they're getting access to. If you imagine being on lockdown and you don't have a TV. We were thinking yesterday, most folks if you're getting to see a newspaper, it's 2 or 3 days late. Imagine being in the community right now and you would find out the up-to-date information about COVID 3 days later. Imagine navigating this like that. And that's what folks on the inside are doing. Today, our Black and Pink newsletter goes to press, and we were able to put in some foundational COVID knowledge that would have a good shelf life. So it's not something that was really valid today and could shift tomorrow. Our policy and advocacy department, our director specifically, stepped up and translated into Spanish some pieces for us so that the Spanish-speaking population inside of institutions could get access. But also we know there are a multitude of languages that are spoken in these institutions. And even if I'm sitting in information, not everyone may be able to get the information, right? And
not everyone is literate.
And we're trying to work in a system that isn't ours. So the answer is for the system that owns said system to do this. I believe Director Frakes released his third video yesterday on Facebook, but they also have an internal television channel that if you have a TV, they can pump these things through there. I would challenge anyone to go to the Nebraska Department of Corrections Facebook page, watch that video, and tell me 3 things you left that video feeling like is new knowledge for you. 3 things that you felt like would be a weapon for you to protect yourself in this crisis. And if you can't, then ask the question, why aren't they sharing that information? Mm-hmm. Because at a time when we don't know much, or we do know, everyone should know.
Mm. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. It has me thinking, there is the possibility that corrections in the facilities could be safe, that there could be a reasonable barrier between people inside and outside. But without the information, without a real understanding of policy, the already massive strain that's present on things, that doesn't look like that's going to take place.
I would want to frame that those spaces are inherently unsafe, period. Mm. There is a potential for this epidemic to not permeate that space.
Yeah.
And until they share information equally, until they see folks on the inside, the needs of incarcerated folks to have the same urgency as folks who are in the community, it's not going to happen. Mm. I know that our legislature went back in, was it Monday that happened?
Yeah, or was it Tuesday? What's today? Thursday. I think they voted yesterday.
Okay, so I know I was watching things on social media, and Megan Hunt, who is my senator in my community, but also has consistently uplifted our needs at Black and Pink around LGBTQ plus folks who are currently incarcerated. We're looking at these budgets, and she was gracious enough to share the budget, but what's going to be addressed for corrections outside of additional overtime? Mm-hmm. Because again, let's talk about everyone who's navigating that system. You are working 16 hours and you come home to your children and your family and you're supposed to be present. You're supposed to wait in line to get into Costco so you can get toilet paper after you've worked for 20 hours. I know down at DCYC, they're continuing to put kids inside of the youth facility. Most of the kids at DCYC are waiting for placement. Mm. Those babies are not down there under charges, right?
Mm-hmm. It halted all trials
all trials in court. Imagine you sitting in county jail at Douglas County Jail, and it's like, oh hey, I'm ready to go to court. I've served my time, such and such and such. Nope, we're not moving. And mind you, 90 days ago, one housing unit at the Douglas County Jail had been locked down because they had an outbreak of flu. Mm. And I had a family member share with me that her brother was not able to go to court because they had said no one could leave the housing unit. So this is the stuff that's going to happen. And I said this yesterday, my next fear is that the tension and frustration that could be brewing inside of these institutions, how it's going to affect folks emotionally. Mm. What type of disagreements can happen? What type of altercations could be taking place inside of institutions? Mm-hmm. And when we could really address that. People in the community are emotional.
Yeah, it's volatile out here, let alone you confine it to a smaller space with less resources, less access, and that's already unsafe.
And no one's telling you specifically they care about you. Mm. I think one of the strongest tools we've had in this epidemic, and if I had to think about a positive outcome, for me personally, is how much I've called people or just checked on people. Just randomly, hey, you good?
Yeah, I called my auntie the other day. I was like, are you? She's like, I'm good.
Seriously.
But like, this
right. Just that. And it's not that we, we're going. And I know when someone checks on me, even when it's like random, it's like, oh, someone sees me. Everything's not perfect, but I'm seen. Mm-hmm. Who's telling folks inside that we see you? Either verbally or through how we are addressing this issue through the funding we've provided, or how you, I haven't seen anyone talk about anyone who's incarcerated in any of the media here locally. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard them talk about corrections at all whatsoever. But I know that they will plaster it on every newspaper, on every TV, on every news station if there's a riot inside of these institutions. Mm-hmm. The same way that the Omaha World Herald exposed how corrections was misdocumenting people's sentences, and there was hundreds and hundreds of people who were put inside of institutions. I need the World Herald to be putting it on the front page if we don't have a clear understanding of how COVID-19 is navigating inside of the Nebraska Department of Corrections. I need the folks who work at the news stations to ask these questions, because we're also talking about power and privilege, right?
Yes.
So for the folks who are watching this, that's saying, my goodness, I've sent an email. I've called down to the prison and talked to the caseworker in the housing unit of my loved one, and they're not returning my calls. People return the calls to the people they feel like they have to return the calls to. So a portion of us sending our letter was that, with us being as humble as possible, Black and Pink is a national entity inside of Omaha, Nebraska. And one of the reasons that I had asked our board of directors 2 years ago when I took the position to move the office from Boston, where it had been 13 years, to Omaha, was that I wanted to put the needle around the sort of work that Black and Pink does here in the heart of the state, where I gave the Department of Corrections almost 10 years of my life inside of these institutions, right? So folks who are in power, reporters, senators, leaders who have the tether to people who are in power, I need y'all asking the questions too. And if you don't want to do it publicly, if it has to be a private conversation, that's fine. But let's get to a solution. Let's get some traction. Because I haven't slept in about a week. And I'm not alone in that, and I know that. But it's scary because I don't have answers for what they're asking me. I keep looking at my phone because the pings are coming in from JPay of folks who are asking, what's happening? Have you heard anything? I was supposed to get my appeal back. It hasn't come back yet. Can you call my attorney? I'm supposed to get home. My mom's sick. So this is a human issue, Dewan.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dominique. I appreciate it, your time. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll have this broadcasted on social media, and we'll have it uploaded on noiseomaha.com.
Yeah. And please, you can go to the Facebook page, and the link to the letter is there. If you want to know exactly what we asked for, if you wanted to share it out, our policy and advocacy department has opened up the sign-on process again. So your name wouldn't be on that initial letter, of course, but you can still sign on. You can still sign on in support and share it with people. So go to the Black and Pink Facebook page and do that. And the last thing, like everyone, we're taking in donations. The first round of our funding, we want to send $15 to every person who's living with HIV and AIDS, who's publicly disclosed that in our database, or who identifies as immunocompromised, to get them soap, sanitizer, and the type of food they may need to take their medications. So you can go to our Facebook page, and our COVID-19 link to donate is there as well, because we're not only addressing Nebraska, we're addressing these issues nationally. Thank you so much, Dewan. I know there's so much going on, but I appreciate you so much.
And this is a massive part of our community, and something that needs to be brought to the forefront that we're thinking about. I know there's a lot going on, but when we start with our most vulnerable, then we're able to do something that helps all of us. So thank you.